So I want to see if my voice will hold up. I probably sound like a frog, but I think I sound a little better than I did yesterday. So I'm going to see if my voice holds up. I cannot stand being sick, and I'm so restless. So I just want to read some books, and hopefully my voice holds up, and I can get a good recording to add to the bell hooks list. Oh, hi, Dad. Full disclosure, it's not going to be a really good reading space. My voice is hoarse due to COVID, but I just can't stand being sick. So I'm going to try to do a quick reading space, and you're going to hear me drinking a lot of water. So excuse the way I sound. Let's see. I'm going to be reading off the hard copy book, so I won't be looking at the space. I won't be able to see if there's listeners. I do see a die, so I hope you enjoy it. Again, apologies for how hoarse I sound. All right, so this is Bell Hooks, All About Love, Chapter 11, Loss, Loving into Life and Death. You have to trust that every friendship has no end, that a communion of saints exists among all those, living and dead, who have truly loved God and one another. You know from experience how real this is. Those you have loved deeply and who have died live on in you, not just as memories, but as real presence. Henry Nolan. Love makes us feel more alive. Living in a state of lovelessness, we feel we might as well be dead. Everything within us is silent and still. We are unmoved. Soul murder is the term psychoanalysts use to describe this state of living death. It echoes the biblical declaration that anyone who does not know love is still in death. Cultures of domination court death, hence the ongoing fascination with violence. The false insistence that it is natural for the strong to prey on the weak, for the more powerful to prey upon the powerless. In our culture, the worship of death is so intense, it stands in the way of love. On his deathbed, Erich Fromm asked a beloved friend why we prefer love of death to love of life, while the human race prefers necrophilia to biophilia. End quote. Coming from Fromm, this question was merely rhetorical, as it has spent his life explaining our cultural failure to fully embrace the reality that love gives meaning. Unlike love, death will touch us all at some point in our lives. We will witness the death of others, or we will witness our own dying, even if it's just in that brief instance when life is fading away. Living with lovelessness is not a problem we openly and readily complain about. Yet the reality that we will all die generates tremendous concern, fear, and worry. It may very well be that the worship of death, indicated by the constant spectacles of dying we watch on television screens daily, is one way our culture tries to still that fear, to conquer it, to make us comfortable. Writing about the meaning of death in contemporary culture, Thomas Merton explains, psychoanalysis has taught us something about the death wish that pervades the modern culture. We discover our affluent society to be profoundly addicted to the love of death. In such a society, though many may officially be said about human values, whenever there is, in fact, a choice between the living and the dead, between men and money, or men and power, or men and bombs, the choice will always be for death. For death is the end or the goal of life. Our culture obsession with death consumes energy that could be given to the art of loving. The worship of death is a central component of patriarchal thinking, whether expressed by women or men. Visionary theologians see the failure of religion as one reason our culture remains death-centered. In his work, Original Blessings, Matthew Fox explains, Western civilization has preferred love of death to love of life to the very extent that its religious traditions have preferred redemption to creation, sin to ecstasy, and individual introspection to cosmic awareness and appreciation. Let me get some water. I feel my voice going out again. It's cool though, because it doesn't hurt as much as it did this morning. Okay, let me see. For the most part, patriarchal perspectives have shaped religious teachings and practice. Recently, there has been a turning away from these teachings towards a creation grounded spirituality that is life affirming. Fox calls this the via positiva. Without this solid grounding in creation's powers, we become bored, violent people. We become necrophiliacs in love with death and the powers and principalities of death. We move away from this worship of death by challenging patriarchy, creating peace, working for justice, and embracing a love ethic. Ironically, the worship of death as a strategy for coping with our underlying fear of death's power does not truly give us solace. It is deeply anxiety producing. The more we watch spectacles of meaningless death, of random violence and cruelty, the more afraid we become in our daily lives. We cannot embrace the stranger with love, for we fear the stranger. We believe the stranger is a messenger of death who wants our life. This irrational fear is an expression of madness. If we think of madness as meaning we are out of touch with reality, even though we are more likely to be hurt by someone we know than a stranger, our fear is directed toward the unknown and the unfamiliar. That fear brings with it intense paranoia and a constant obsession with safety. The growing number of gated communities in our nation is but one example of the obsession with safety. With guards at the gate, individuals still have bars and elaborate internal security systems. Americans spend more than $30 billion a year on security. When I've stayed with friends in these communities and inquired as to whether all the security is in response to an actual danger, I'm told not really, that it is the fear of threat rather than a real threat that is the catalyst for an obsession with safety that borders on madness. Culturally, we bear witness to this madness every day. We can all tell endless stories of how it makes itself known in everyday life. For example, an adult white male answers the door when a young Asian male rings the bell. We live in a culture where, without responding to any gesture of aggression or hostility on the part of the stranger, who is simply lost in trying to find the correct address, the white male shoots him, believing he is protecting his life and his property. This is an everyday example of madness. The person who is really the threat here is the homeowner, who has been so well socialized by the thinking of white supremacy, of capitalism, of patriarchy, that he can no longer respond rationally. White supremacy has taught him that all people of color are threats irrespective of their behavior. Capitalism has taught him that at all costs, his property can and must be protected. Patriarchy has taught him that his masculinity has to be proved by the willingness to conquer fear through aggression, that it would be unmanly to ask questions before taking action. Mass media then brings us the news of this in a newspeak manner that sounds almost jocular and celebratory, as though no tragedy has happened, as though the sacrifice of a young life was necessary to uphold property values and white patriarchal honor. Viewers are encouraged to feel sympathy for the white male homeowner who made a mistake. The fact that this mistake led to the violent death of an innocent young man does not register. The narrative is worded in a manner that encourages viewers to identify with the one who made the mistake by doing what we led to feel we might all do to protect our property at all costs from any sense of perceived threat. This is what the worship of death looks like. All the worship of death we see on our television screens, or all the death we witness daily, does not prepare us in any way to face dying with awareness, clarity, or peace of mind. When worship of death is rooted in fear, it does not enable us to live fully or well. Marathon contends. Hold on, let me grab some water. when worship, when worship of death is rooted in fear, it does not enable us to live fully or well. Martin contends, if we become obsessed with the idea of death hiding and waiting for us in ambush, we are not making death more real, but less real. But life less real. That's important. Our life is divided against itself. It becomes a tug of war between the love and the fear of itself. Death then operates in the midst of life, not as the end of life, but rather as the fear of life. To live fully, we would need to let go of our fear of dying. That fear can only be addressed by the love of living. We have a long history in this nation of believing that to be too celebratory is dangerous. Sorry, lost my breath. That being optimistic is foolhardy, hence our difficulty in celebrating life and teaching our children and ourselves how to love life. Many of us come to love life only when faced with life-threatening illnesses. Certainly, facing the possibility of my own death gave me the courage to confront the lack of love in my life. Much contemporary visionary work on death and dying has highlighted learning how to love. Loving makes it possible for us to change our worship of death to a celebration of life. In an unsent letter written to a true love in my life, I wrote, during the memorial service for her sister, my friend gave testimony in which she declared, death has left us loving her completely. We are so much more capable, I'm sorry, we are so much more able to embrace the loss of intimate loved ones and friends when we know that we have given our all, when we have shared with them that mutual recognition and belonging and love which death can never change or take away. Each day I'm grateful for having known a love that enables me to embrace death with no fear of incompleteness or lack, with no sense of irredeemable regret. That is a gift you gave. I cherish it. Nothing changes its value. It remains precious. Love does this. Love empowers us to live fully and die well. Death becomes then not an end to life, but a part of living. In her autobiography, The Wheel of Life, published shortly after her death, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross tells the story of her awakening to the realization that we can face death without fear. In these earliest days of what would become known as the birth of theology, or the study of death, my greatest teacher was a black cleaning woman. I do not remember her name, but what drew my attention to her was the effect she had on many of the most seriously ill patients. Each time she left their rooms, I noticed a tangible difference in their attitudes. I wanted to know her secret. Desperately curious, I literally spied on this woman who had never finished high school but knew a big secret. The secret that this wise black woman knew, which Kubler-Ross positively appropriated, was that we must befriend death and let it be our guide in life, meeting it unafraid. When the black cleaning lady who had triumphed over many hardships in her own life, who had lost loved ones to early deaths, entered the rooms of the dying, she brought with her a willingness to talk openly about death without fear. This nameless angel gave Kubler-Ross the most valuable lesson of her life, telling her, death is not a stranger to me. He is an old acquaintance. It takes courage to befriend death. We find the courage in life through loving. Our collective fear of death is a disease of the heart. Love is the only cure. Many people approach death with despair because they realize they have not lived their lives as they wanted to. They never found their true selves, or they never found the love their hearts longed to know. Sometimes facing death, they offer themselves the love they did not offer for most of their lives. They gave themselves acceptance, the unconditional love that is the core of self-love. In her foreword to Intimate Death, Marie de Hensel describes witnessing the way approaching death can enable people to become more fully self-actualized. She writes, at the moment of utter solitude, when the body breaks down on the edge of infinity, a separate time begins to run that cannot be measured in any normal way. In the course of several days, something happens. With the help of another presence that allows despair and pain to declare themselves, the dying sees holds of their lives, takes possession of them, unlock their truth. They discover the freedom of being true to themselves. This deathbed recognition of love's power is a moment of ecstasy. We would be lucky if we felt this power all our days and not just when days are ending. Okay? When we love every day, we do not need the imminent threat of sure death to be true to ourselves. Living with awareness and clarity of mind and heart, we are able to embrace the realization of our dying in a manner that allows us to live more fully because we know death is always with us. There is no one among us who is a stranger to death. Our first home in the womb is also a grave where we await the coming of life. Our first experience of living is a moment of resurrection, a movement out of the shadows and into the light. When we watch a child physically coming out of the womb, we know we are in the presence of the miraculous. Yet it does not take long for us to forget the magical harmony of the transition from death into life. And death soon becomes the passage we want to avoid, but it has become harder for our nations to flee death, even though on the average we have longer lifespans. Death surrounds us now more than ever, as so many life-threatening diseases take the lives of loved ones, friends, and acquaintances, many of whom are young in years. The strong presence of dying often cannot penetrate our cultural denial that death is always among us, and people still refuse to let an awareness of death guide them. For the recording, you're going to hear me clear my throat a lot. I have COVID, so this chapter literally is speaking to me right now. When I was in the hospital earlier, there was so much it's a hospital, so you expect disease. But the way in which I've seen through the pandemic that people have just embraced a death culture, that people are just expendable, that we're not going to have a systemic approach to help save lives in a pandemic, a global approach, since this is a disease that anybody can get and has been found all over the world, that they're in America, at least I could say that even in the hospitals with the nurses and the doctors, bro, everyone has accepted that they're willing to let a large portion of us die. I think that's why this chapter speaks to me a lot and why I wanted to do it even though I feel like shit and I'm so fucking sick. I'm actually thinking about death a lot. Unfortunately, this is my fourth time with COVID, and this is the worst that my symptoms have gotten. When I was a little girl, our mother talked with ease about the possibility of death. Let me grab some water real quick. When I was a little girl, when I was a little girl, our mother talked with ease about the possibility of death. Often, when we would put off for tomorrow the things that could be done today, she would remind us that life is not promised. This was her way of urging us to live life to the fullest, to live so that we could be without regret. I am continually surprised when friends and strangers act as though any talk of death is a sign of pessimism or morbidity. Death is among us. To see it always and only as a negative subject is to lose sight of its power to enhance every moment. Luckily, those healers and comforters who work with the dying show us how to face the reality of death, so that talking about it is not taboo. Just as we are often unable to speak about our need to love and be loved because we fear our words would be interpreted as signs of weaknesses or failure, so are we rarely able to share our thoughts about death and dying. No wonder then that we are collectively unable to confront the significance of grief. Just as the dying are often carted off so that the process of dying will be witnessed by only a select few, grieving individuals are encouraged to let themselves go only in private, in appropriate settings away from the rest of us. Sustained grief is particularly disturbing in a culture that offers a quick fix for any pain. Sometimes it amazes me to know intuitively that the grieving are all around us, yet we do not see any overt signs of their anguished spirits. We are taught to feel shame about grief that lingers. Like a stain on our clothes, it marks us as flawed, imperfect. To cling to grief, to desire its expression, is to be out of sync with modern life, where the hip do not get bogged down in mourning. Love knows no shame. To be loving is to be open to grief, to be touched by sorrow, even sorrow that has an unending. The way we grieve is informed by whether we know love. Since loving lets us let go of so much fear, it also guides our grief. When we lose someone we love, we can grieve without shame. That's true. given that commitment is an important aspect of love. We who love know we must sustain ties in life and death. Our mourning, our letting ourselves grieve over the loss of loved ones is an expression of our commitment, a form of communication and communion. Knowing this and possessing the courage to claim our grief as an expression of love's passion does not make the process simple in a culture that would deny us the emotional alchemy of grief. Much of our culture's suspicion of intense grief is rooted in the that unleashing, fear that the unleashing of such passion will overtake us and keep us from life. However, this fear is usually misguided. In its deepest sense, grief is a burning of the heart and intense heat that gives us solace and release. When we deny the full expression of our grief, it lays like a weight on our hearts, causing emotional pain and physical ailments. Grief is most often unrelenting when individuals are not reconciled to the reality of loss. Love invites us to grieve for the dead as rituals of mourning and as celebration. I'm so sorry. When we honor their presence by naming the legacies they leave us, we need not contain grief when we use it as a means to intensify our love for the dead and dying for those who remain alive. One second. I really have no qualms reading this book while sick. I was going to take a break from reading spaces until I got well, but this is part of life. And I think it's important that we read texts like this, bell hooks, and other minds that analyze our material conditions at varying degrees and levels, especially in times like this. So I just see this as part of the work, and it's necessary. Toward the end of her brilliant career, Kubler-Ross was convinced that there really is no death. Also, too, I want to read when I'm sick because on a recorded space, because capitalism has taught us that we have to show up perfect all the time. And I don't think that's true. So we should show up even when we're quote unquote imperfect and get used to hearing from voices that might not be pretty or who might be sick or disabled in any way. We need to get accustomed to listening to that. Like those who believe in an afterlife, resurrection, and reincarnation, death becomes then not an end, but a new beginning. These insights, however enlightening, do not change the fact that in death we surrender our embodied life on earth. Love is the only force that allows us to hold one another close beyond the grave. That is why knowing how to love each other is also a way of knowing how to die. When the poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning declares in her sonnet, "I shall but love thee better after death," she attests to the importance of memory and communion with our dead. When we allow our dead to be forgotten, we fall prey to the notion that the end of embodied life corresponds to the death of the spirit. In biblical scripture, the divine voice declares, "I have set before you life and death. Therefore, choose life." Embracing the spirit that lives beyond the body is one way to choose life. We embrace that spirit through rituals of remembering, through ceremonies wherein we invoke the spirit presence of our dead, and through ordinary rituals in everyday life where we keep the spirit of those we have lost close. Sometimes we invoke the dead by allowing wisdom they have shared to guide our present actions. Sorry. Or we invoke the reenacting of one of their habits of being, and the grief that may never leave us, even as we do not allow it to overwhelm us, is also a way to give homage to our dead and to hold them. In a culture like ours, where few of us seek to know perfect love, grief is often overshadowed by regret. We regret things left unsaid, things left unreconciled. Now and then, when I find myself forgetting to celebrate life, unmindful of the way embracing death can heighten and enhance the way I interact with the world, I take time to think about whether I would be at peace knowing that I left someone without saying what's in my heart, that I left with harsh words. I try daily to learn to leave folks as though we might never be meeting again. This practice makes us change how we talk and interact. It is a way to live consciously. The only way to live that life where, as Edith Piaf sings, we regret nothing is by awakening to an awareness of the value of the value of right livelihood and right actions. understanding, understanding that death is always with us can serve as the faithful reminder that the time to do what we feel called to do is always now and not in some distant and unimagined future. Yo, that hit right on time. Buddhist monk teaches our appointment with life that we find our true selves by living fully in the present. To return to the present is to be in contact with life. Life can be found only in the present moment because the past no longer is and the future has not yet come. Our appointment with life is in the present moment. The place of our appointment is right here in this very place. Living in a culture that is always encouraging us to plan for the future, it is no easy task to develop the capacity to be here now. When we live fully in the present, when we acknowledge that death is always with us, and not just there at the moment when we breathe our last breath, we are not devastated by events over which we have no control. Losing a job, rejection by someone we hope to connect with, the loss of a longtime friend or companion, reminds us everything we seek can only be found in the present, that to abandon the present in order to look for things in the future is to throw away the substance and hold on to the shadow. To be here now does not mean that we do not make plans, but that we learn to give the making of future plans only a small amount of energy. And once future plans are made, we release our attachment to them. Sometimes it helps to write down our plans for the future and put them away, out of sight and out of mind. Oh, shit. Sorry, I got chest pains. Accepting death with love means we embrace the reality. One second. Sometimes it helps to write down our plans. Oh, I'm sorry. Accepting death with love means we embrace the reality of the unexpected, of experience over which we have no control. Love empowers us to surrender. We do not need to have endless anxiety and worry about whether we will fulfill our goals or plans. Death is always there to remind us that our plans are transitory. By learning to love, we learn to accept change. Without change, we cannot grow. Our will to grow in spirit and truth is how we stand before life and death, ready to lose life. I'm sorry, ready to choose life. Damn, I'm sounding so morbid. Mm-mm. Chapter 12, Healing, Redemptive Love. We have been brought into the inner wine cellar and sealed with his seal, which is to suffer out of love. The adore of this love greatly outweighs any suffering we may undergo, for suffering comes to an end, but love is forever. Tessa Bilecki. Love heals. When we are wounded in the place where we would know love, it is difficult to imagine that love really has the power to change everything. No matter what has happened in our past, when we open our hearts to love, we can live as if born again, not forgetting the past, but seeing it in a new way. Letting it live inside us is a new way. We go forward with the fresh insight that the past can no longer hurt us. Or, if our past was one in which we were loved, we know that no matter the occasional presence of suffering in our lives, we will return always to remembered calm and bliss. Mindful remembering lets us put the broken bits and pieces of our hearts together again. This is the way healing begins. Contrary, to what we may have been taught to think. Unnecessary and unchosen suffering wounds us but need not scar us for life. Contemporary to what we may have been taught to think, unnecessary and unchosen suffering wounds us but need not scar us for life. It does mark us. What we allow the mark of our suffering to become is in our own hands. In his collection of essays, The Fire Next Time, James Baldwin writes about suffering and the healing process, stating, I do not mean to be sentimental about suffering, but people who cannot suffer can never grow up, can never discover who they are. Growing up is at heart the process of learning to take responsibility for whatever happens in your life. To choose growth is to embrace the love that heals. The healing power of mind and heart is always present because we have the capacity to renew our spirits endlessly, to restore the soul. I'm always particularly grateful to meet people who do not feel their childhoods were marked by unnecessary pain and suffering, by lovelessness. Their presence reminds me that we do not need to undergo anything dreadful to feel deeply, but we never need suffering to be imposed upon us by acts of violence and abuse. At times, we will all be confronted with suffering and unexpected illness, a loss. The pain will come whether we choose it or not, and not one of us can escape it. The presence of pain in our lives is not an indicator of dysfunction. Not all families are dysfunctional. And while it has been crucial for collective self discovery that we have exposed and continue to expose dysfunction, it is equally important to revel in and celebrate its absence. Unless we can all imagine a world in which the family is not dysfunctional but is instead a place where love abounds, we do family life to be always and only a site of woundedness. In functional families, individuals face conflict, contradictions, times of unhappiness, and suffering just like dysfunctional families do. The difference lies in how these issues are confronted and resolved, and how everyone copes in moments of crisis. Healthy family resolve conflict without coercion, shaming, or violence. When we collectively move our culture in the direction of love, we may see these loving families represented more in the mass media. They will become more visible in all walks of daily life. Hopefully, we will then listen to these stories. Hopefully, we will then listen to these stories with the same intensity that we have when we listen to narratives of violent pain and abuse. When this happens, the visible happiness of functional families will become part of our collective consciousness. In the family, a revolutionary way of self-discovery, John Bradford offers this definition. A functional, healthy family is one in which all the members are fully functional and all the relationships between the members are fully functional. As human beings, all family members have available to them the use of all their human power. They use these powers to cooperate, individuate, and to get their collective and individual needs met. At a functional family, a functional family is the healthy soil out of which individuals can become mature human beings. In the functional family, self-esteem is learned and there is a balance between autonomy and dependency. Long before the terms functional and dysfunctional were used to identify types of families, those of us who were wounded in childhood knew it because we were in pain, and that pain did not go away even when we left home. More than our pain, our self-destructive, self-betraying behavior trapped us in the traumas of childhood. We are unable to find solace or release. We could not choose healing because we were not sure we could ever mend, that the broken bits and pieces could ever be put together again. We confronted ourselves by acting out, but this comfort did not last. It was usually followed by depression or overwhelming grief. We longed to be. I turned off my alarm. I set up my alarm because, unfortunately, my oxygen level in my blood is low, so I have to check it. Oh, this is crazy. But a part of life, right? Yep. We confronted ourselves by acting out, but this comfort did not last. It was usually followed by depression and overwhelming grief. We longed to be rescued because we did not know how to save ourselves. More often than not, we became addicted to living dangerously. Clinging to this addiction made it impossible for us to be well in our souls. As with all other addiction, letting go and choosing wellness was our only way of rescue and recovery. In many ways, I've acted out through much of my life. When I began to walk on the path of love, I was awed by how quickly previous dysfunctions were changed. In the church of my girlhood, we were always told no one could give an individual salvation, that we had to choose it for ourselves. We had to want to be saved. And Tony Cade's I'm sorry, I say their name wrong all the time. The Salt Eaters, wise older women who are healers, are called in to assist the young woman who has attempted suicide. They tell her, just so you're sure, sweetheart, and ready to be healed, because wholeness is no trifling matter, a lot of weight when you are well. Making the primal choice to be saved does not mean we do not need support and help with problems and difficulties. It is simply that the initial gesture of taking responsibility for our well-being, wherein we confess to our brokenness, our woundedness, and open ourselves to salvation, must be made by the individual. This act of opening the heart enables us to receive the healing offered us by those who care. Although we all want to know love, we talk about the search for true love as though it is always and only a solitary quest. I apologize. I am disturbed by the weighty emphasis on self in so much New Age writing on the topic and in our culture as a whole. When I would talk about my yearning for a loving partner, people told me over and over that I did not need anyone else. They would say I did not need a companion or a circle of loved ones to feel complete, that I should be complete inside myself. While it is completely true that the interconnectedness and a sense of fulfillment can be there whether or not we commune in love or with others, it is equally meaningful to give voice to that longing for communion. Life without communion and love with others would be less fulfilling no matter the extent of one's self-love. All over the world, people live in intimate daily contact with one another. They wash together, eat and sleep together, face challenges together, share joy and sorrow. The rugged individual who relies on no one else is a figure who can only exist in a culture of domination, where a privileged few use more of the world's resources than the many who must daily do without. Some water real quick. Worship of individualism has in part led us to the unhealthy culture of narcissism that is so all-pervasive in our society. Western travelers journeys to the poorest countries and are astounded by the level of communion between people who, though not materially rich, have full hearts. It is no accident that so many of the spiritual teachers we gravitate to in our affluent society, which is driven by the ethos of rugged individualism, come from cultures that value interdependency and working for a collective good over independence and individual gain. While terms like codependency, which came out of programs for individual self-recovery, rightly show the ways in which excessive dependency can be unhealthy, especially when it is marked by the support of addictive behavior, we still need to talk about healthy interdependency. No organization dedicated to healing demonstrates this principle more than Alcoholics Anonymous. The millions of people who attend AA meetings seek a place of recovery and find that the affirming community that surrounds them creates an environment of healing. This community offers to individuals, some for the first time ever in their lives, a taste that acceptance, care, knowledge, and responsibility that is love in action. Rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion. Most of us find that space of healing communion with like-minded souls. Other individuals recover themselves in their communion with divine spirit. Saint Teresa of Avila found in her union with the divine recognition, comfort, and solace. She wrote, "There is no need to go to heaven in order to speak with one's eternal Father or find delight in him. nor is there any need to shout. However softly we speak, he is near enough to hear us. All one needed to do, go in solitude and look at him within oneself and to turn away from so good a guest, but with great humility speak to him. Prayers provides a space where talking cures. It is no doubt a sign of the spiritual crisis of our time that books are written to provide proof that prayer is soothing for the soul. All religious traditions acknowledge that there is comfort in reaching for the sacred through words. Whether traditional liturgy, I don't know how to say that word, sorry, or prayer or chants, I pray daily as a gesture of spiritual vigilance. Prayer is an exercise that strengthens the soul's power. Reaching for the divine always reminds me of the limitations of human thought and will. Stretching, reaching toward that which is limitless and without boundaries is an exercise that strengthens my faith and empowers my soul. Prayer allows each person to private place of confession. There is truth in the axiom, confession is good for the soul. It allows us to bear witness to our own trespasses, to those ways we miss the mark, a definition of meaning of sinfulness. It is only as we recognize and comfort the circumstances of our spiritual for- forgetfulness that we assume accountability. In their work, The Raft is Not the Shore, Daniel Berrigan and, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say this person's name, stress that the bridge of illusion must be destroyed before a real bridge can be constructed. In communion with divine spirit, we can claim the space of accountability and renew our commitment to that transformation of spirit that opens the heart and prepares us to love. After we have made the choice to be healed in love, faith that transformation will come gives us a peace of mind and heart that is necessary when the soul seeks revolution. It is difficult to wait. No doubt that is why biblical scriptures urge the seeker to learn how to wait, for waiting renews our strength. When we surrender to the wait, we allow changes to emerge within us without anticipation or struggle. When we do this, we are stepping out on faith. In Buddhist terms, this practice of surrender, of letting go, makes it possible for us to enter a space of compassion where we can feel sympathy for ourselves and others. That compassion awakens us to the healing power of service. Love in action is always about service, what we do to enhance spiritual growth. I'm so glad I'm rereading this because, like, recently, I thought I was doing love wrong, but I was actually in my purpose. This definitely came right on time. Love in action is always about service, what we do to enhance spiritual growth. A focus on individual reflection, contemplation, and therapeutic dialogue is vital to healing. For sure. This is really affirming. I'm grateful. But it is not the only way to recover ourselves. Serving others is a fruitful path to the heart as any other therapeutic practice. To truly serve, we must always empty the ego so that space can exist for us to recognize the needs of others and be capable of fulfilling them. The greater our compassion, the more aware we are of ways to extend ourselves to others that makes healing possible. Yo, when I get better, no, fuck that. I'm going to find ways in which I can still be of service even though I'm like sick and I feel so fucking physically weak. But I'm definitely going to find, because, yo, that's just me, man. Like, doing for others, being in community, building community, that's my shit. And I'm glad to know and be reminded that that is love. To know compassion fully is to engage in a process of forgiveness and recognition that enables us to release all the baggage we carry that serves as a barrier to healing. Compassion opens the way for individuals to feel empathy for others without judgment. Judging others increases our alienation. When we judge, we are less able to forgive. The absence of forgiveness keeps us mired in shame. Often our spirits have been broken again and again through rituals of disregard in which we are shamed by others or shamed ourselves. Shame breaks and it weakens us, keeping us away from our wholeness healing offers. We practice forgiveness, we let go of shame. Embedded in our shame is always a sense of being unworthy. It separates. Compassion and forgiveness reconnects us. Forgiveness not only enables us to overcome estrangement, it intensifies our capacity for affirming one another. Without conscious forgiveness, there can be no genuine reconciliation. Making amends both to ourselves and to others is the gift compassion and forgiveness offers us. It is a process of emptying out wherein we let go all the waste so that there is a clear place within where we can see the others as ourselves. Kassar Jian explains in Forgiveness, even small acts of forgiveness always have significant ramifications at a personal level. Even small acts of forgiveness contribute to one's sense of trust in oneself and potential of others. They contribute to a human spirit that is fundamentally hopeful and optimistic rather than pessimistic or defeated. They contribute to knowing oneself and others as potentially powerful people who can choose who can choose to lovingly create versus, there we go, seeing humans as basically selfish and destructive sinners. When we have clarity of mind and heart, we are able to know delight, to engage the sensual world around us with a pleasure that is immediate and profound. In his essay, Down at the Cross, James Baldwin declares to be sensual is to respect and rejoice in the force of life itself, to be present in all that one does, from the effort of loving to the breaking of bread. Poet Adrian Rich cautions against the loss of the sensual in what is found there. Notebooks on poetry and politics. Sensual vitality is essential to the struggle for life. It's as simple as threatened as that. Estrangement from the realm of the senses is a direct product of overindulgence, of acquiring too much. This is why living simply is as crucial part of healing. As we begin to simplify, to let the clutter go, whether it's the clutter of desire or the actual material clutter and incessant busyness that fills every space, we recover our capacity to be sensual. When this asleep body, numb and deadened to the world of the senses, awakens, it is a resurrection that reveals us that love is stronger than death. Love redeems, despite all the lovelessness that surrounds us. Nothing has been able to block our longing for love. The intensity of our yearning, the understanding that love redeems, appears to be a resilient aspect of the heart's knowledge. The healing power of redemptive love lures us and calls us toward the possibility of healing. We cannot account for the presence of the heart's knowledge. Like all great mysteries, we are all mysteriously called to love no matter the conditions of our lives, the degree of our depravity or despair. The presence of this call gives us reason to hope. Without hope, we cannot return to love. Breaking our sense of isolation and opening up the window of opportunity, hope provides us with a reason to go forward. It is a practice of positive thinking. Being positive, living in a permanent state of hopefulness, renews the spirit. Renewing our faith in love's promise, hope is our covenant. I began thinking and writing about love when I heard cynicism instead of hope in the voices of young and old. Cynicism is the greatest barrier to love. It is rooted in doubt and despair. Fear intensifies our doubt. It paralyzes. Faith and hope allows us to let fear go. Fear stands in the way of love. When we take to heart the biblical insistence that there is no fear in love, we understand the necessity of choosing courageous thought and action. This scripture encourages us to find comfort in knowing that perfect love casts our fear. This is our reminder that even if fear exists, it can be released by the experience of perfect love. The alchemy of perfect love is such that it offers to us all a love that is able to vanquish fear. That which is rendered separate or strange through fear is made whole through perfect love. It is this perfect love that is redemptive, that can, like the intense heat of alchemical fire, burn away impurities and leave the soul free. Significantly, we are told in biblical scripture that it is crucial that love cast out fear because fear hath torment. These words speak directly to the presence of anguish in our lives when we are driven by fear. The practice of loving is the healing force that brings sustained peace. It is the practice of love that transforms. As one gives and receives love, fear is let go. As we live the understanding that there is no fear in love, our anguish diminishes and we garner the strength to enter more deeply into love's paradise. We are able to accept that giving ourselves over to love completely restores the soul. We are made perfect in love. The transformative power of love is not fully embraced in our society because we often wrongly believe the torment and anguish are our natural condition. This assumption seems to be affirmed by the ongoing tragedy that prevails in modern society. In a world anguished by rampant destruction, fear prevails. When we love, we no longer allow our hearts to be held captive by fear. The desire to be powerful is rooted in the intensity of fear. Power gives us the illusion of having triumphed over fear, over our need for love. To return to love, to know perfect love, we surrender to will to power. It is this revelation that makes the scriptures on perfect love so prophetic and revolutionary for our times. We cannot know love if we remain unable to surrender our attachment to power. If any feeling of vulnerability strikes terror in our hearts, lovelessness torments. As our cultural awareness of the ways we are seduced away from love, away from the knowledge that love heals, gains recognition, our anguish intensifies. But so does our yearning. The space for our lack is also the space of possibility. As we yearn, we make ourselves ready to receive the love that is coming to us as gift, as promise, as earthly paradise. Hold on, let me grab some more. Okay. 13. Destiny, when angels speak of love. Love is our true destiny. We do not find the meaning of life by ourselves alone. We find it with another. Thomas Merton. Believing in divine love comforted me as a child when I felt overwhelmed by loneliness and sorrow. The solace of knowing I could speak my heart to God and the angels made me feel less alone. They were there with me during anguished and terrifying dark nights of the soul when no one understood. They were there with me, listening to my tears and my heartache. I could not see them, but I knew they were there. I heard them whispering, no, I'm sorry. I heard them whispering to me about love's promise, letting me know all would be well with my soul, speaking to my heart in a divinely secret, sweet language. Angels bear witness. They are the guardian spirits who watch, protect, and guide us throughout our lives. Sometimes they take a human form. At other times they are pure spirit, unseen, unimaginable, just forever present. One sign that a religious awakening is taking place in our culture is our obsession with angels. Images of angels are everywhere. There are characters in movies, images in books, on note cards and calendars, on curtains and wallpaper. Angels represent for us a vision of innocence, of beings not burdened by guilt or shame. Whether we imagine them, the dark round-faced forms of Coptic tradition, or the fair winged cherubs that we usually see, they are messengers of the divine. We see them as always bringing news that will give our hearts ease. Our cultural passion for the angelic expresses our longing to be in paradise, to return on earth to a time of connectedness and goodwill, to a time when we were heart whole. Even though the images of angels we most commonly see are childlike figures, aglow with rapture and unspeakable delight, as messengers, they carry the weight of our burden, our sorrows, and our joys. In representations, they are most often given a childlike visage to remind us that enlightenment comes only as we return to a childlike state and are born again. We see angels as light-hearted creatures in swift motion reaching for the heavens. Their being and the weight of their knowledge is never static, always changing. They see through our false selves, possessing psychic insight, intuition, and the wisdom of the heart. They stand for the promise of life fulfilled through the unions of knowledge and responsibility. As guardians of the soul's well-being, they care for us with us. I'm not really feeling this chapter because it's so heavily Christian, but I'm just going to power through. Our turning toward the angelic is evocative of our yearning to embrace spiritual growth. It reveals our collective desire to return to love. The first stories of angels I heard as a child were told at church. From religious teachings, I learned that as messengers of the divine, angels were wise counselors. They were able to assist us in our spiritual growth. Unconditional lovers of the human spirit, they were there to help us face reality without fear. The story of an angel that remained most vivid to me throughout my childhood and on into my adult life was the narrative of Jacob's confrontation with the angel on his way home. Jacob was not just any old biblical hero, he was a man capable of intense, passionate love. Coming out of the wilderness where, as a young man, he fled from familiar strife, Jacob enters the land where his relatives live. He meets there his soulmate, Rachel. Even though he swiftly acknowledges his love for her, they can unite only after much hard work, struggle, and suffering. We are told Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, but it seemed to him only a few days. So great was the love he had to her. Damn, that's dope. Interpreting this story in The Man Who Wrestled with God, John Sanford comments, the fact that Jacob could fall in love at all shows that a certain amount of psychological growth had taken place in him during his journey through the wilderness. So far, the only woman in his life had been his mother. As long as a man remains in a state of psychological development in which his mother is the most important woman to him, he cannot mature as a man. A man's eros has capacity for love and relatedness, must be freed from attachment to the mother, and able to reach out to a woman who is his contemporary. Otherwise, he remains a demanding, dependent, childish person. Here, Sanford is speaking about negative dependency, which is not the same as healthy attachment. Men who are positively attached to their mothers are able to balance that bond, negotiating dependency and autonomy, and can extend it to affectional bonds with other women. In fact, most women know that a man who genuinely loves his mother is likely to be a better friend, partner, or mate than a man who has always been overly dependent on his mother, expecting her to unconditionally meet all his needs. Since genuine love requires a recognition of the autonomy of ourselves and the other person, a man who has loved in childhood has already learned healthy practices of individuation. As Jacob labors for Rachel, making wrong choices and difficult decisions, he grows and matures. By the time they wed, he is able to be a loving partner. Meeting his soulmate does not mean Jacob's journey toward self-actualization and wholeness ends. When he receives the message from God that he should return to the home he once ran from, he must once again journey through the wilderness. Again and again, wise spiritual teachers share with us the understanding that the journey towards self-actualization and spiritual growth is an arduous one, full of challenges. Usually it is downright difficult. Many of us believe our difficulties will end when we find a soulmate. Love does not lead to an end to difficulties. It provides us with the means to cope with our difficulties in ways that embrace our growth. Having worked and waited for love, Jacob becomes psychologically strong. He calls upon the strength when he must once again enter the wilderness to journey home. A divine voice brings Jacob the message that he must return to the land of his ancestors. As a man who has learned to love, Jacob intuitively asks for guidance. He listens to his heart speak. When the answer comes, he acts. Since he left home in the first place because he had conflicts with his brother Esau, the prospect of returning is frightening. But he must come face to face with his past and seek reconciliation if he is to know inner peace and become fully mature. On the long journey home, Jacob continually engages in conversations with God. He prays, he meditates. Seeking solace in solitude, he goes in the dead of the night and walks by a stream. There, a being he does not fully recognize wrestles with him. Unbeknownst to him, Jacob has been given the gift of meeting an angel face to face. Confronting his fears, his demons, his shadow self, Jacob surrenders the longing for safety. Psychologically, he enters the primal night and returns to a psychic space where he is not yet fully awake. It is as though he becomes a child in the womb, again striving to be reborn. The angel is not an adversary seeking to take his life, but rather comes as a witness enabling him to receive the insight that there is joy in struggle. I don't know about that. His fear is replaced by a sense of calm. In Soul Food Stories to Nourish the Spirit and the Heart, Jack Kornfield and Christina Feldman write that we too can choose serenity in the midst of struggle. In that calmness, we begin to understand that peace is not the opposite of challenge and hardship. We understand that the presence of light is not a result of darkness ending. Peace is found not in the absence of challenge, but in our own capacity to be with hardship without judgment, prejudice, and resistance. We discover that we have the energy and the faith to heal ourselves and the world through an open-heartedness in this movement. As Jacob embraces his adversary, he moves through the darkness into the light. Rather than letting the angel go when light comes, Jacob demands and is given a blessing. Significantly, he cannot receive the blessing without first letting fear go and opening his heart to be touched by grace. Sanford writes, Jacob refused to part with his experience until he knew its meaning, and this marked him as a man of spiritual greatness. Everyone who wrestles with his spiritual and psychological experience, and no matter how dark or frightening it is, refuses to let it go until he discovers its meaning and is having something of a Jacob experience. That's interesting. Such a person can come through his dark struggle to the other side reborn, but one who retreats or runs from his encounter with spiritual reality cannot be transformed. It should reassure us that the blessing the angel gives to Jacob comes in a form of a wound. Woundedness is not a cause for shame. It is necessary for spiritual growth and awakening. I can remember how strange it seemed to me as a child when I read this story over and over in my big book of Bible stories for children, that to be wounded could be a blessing. To my child's mind, woundedness was always negative. Being unable to protect oneself from hurt inflicted by others was a source of shame. In coming out of shame, Gerson Kaufman and Lev Raphael contend, shame is the most disturbing emotion we ever experience directly about ourselves. For in the moment of shame, we feel deeply divided from ourselves. Shame is like a wound made by an unseen hand in response to defeat, failure, or rejection. At the same moment that we feel most disconnected, we long to embrace ourselves once more, to feel reunited. Shame divides us from ourselves, just as it divides us from others, and because we still yearn for reunion, shame is deeply disturbing. Shame about woundedness keeps many people from seeking healing. They would rather deny or repress the reality of hurt. In our culture, we hear a lot about guilt, but not enough about the politics of shame. As long as we feel shame, we can never believe ourselves worthy of love. Shame about being hurt often has its origin in childhood, and it is then that the many of us first learn that it is a virtue to be silent about pain. In Banished Knowledge, Facing Childhood Injuries, psychoanalyst Alice Miller states, not to take one's own suffering seriously, to make light of it, or even to laugh at it, considered good manners in our culture, is considered good manner in our culture. This attitude is even called a virtue, and many people at one time, including myself, are proud of their lack of sensitivity toward their own fate and above all toward their own childhood. As more people have found the courage to break through shame and speak about woundedness in their lives, we are now subjected to a mean-spirited cultural response where all talk of woundedness is mocked. Grab some water. The belittling of someone's attempt to name a context within which they were wounded, were made a victim, is a form of shaming. It is psychological terrorism. Shaming breaks our hearts. All individuals who are genuinely seeking well-being within a healing context realize that it is important to that process not to make being a victim a stance of pride or a location from which to simply blame others. We need to speak our shame and our pain courageously in order to recover. Addressing woundedness is not about blaming others. However, it does allow individuals who have been and are hurt to insist on accountability and responsibility both from themselves and from those who were the agents of their suffering, as well as those who bore witness. Constructive confrontation aids our healing. The story of Jacob's confrontation with the angel is a narrative of healing precisely because it shows he is innocent. There is nothing he has done to anger the angel. The adversarial conflict is not of his making. He is not accountable, and he is not to blame for his wound. However, healing happens when he is able to embrace the wound as a blessing and assume responsibility for his actions. We are all wounded at times. A great many of us remain wounded in the place where we would know love. We carry that wound from childhood and adulthood and on to old age. The story of Jacob reminds us that embracing our wound is the way to heal. He accepts his vulnerability. Cornfield and Fieldman remind us that the moment in which we are touched by pain and the unpredictability of life's changes is the moment in which we can find our salvation. As we turn toward the specific shadows in our own lives with an open heart and a clear, focused mind, we ease resisting and begin to understand and to heal. In order to do this, we must learn to feel deeply, not so much opening our eyes as opening the inner sense of the mind and the heart. When Jacob wrestles with the angel, he feels a heightened sense of awareness. Facing this struggle gives him the courage or persevere in his journey back to face conflicts and reconcile them rather than live in alienation and estrangement. As a nation, we need to gather our collective courage and face that our society's lovelessness is a wound. As we allow ourselves to acknowledge the pain of this wound, when it pierces our flesh and we feel in the depths of our soul profound anguish of spirit, we come face to face with the possibility of conversion, of having a change of heart. In this way, recognition of the wound is a blessing because we are able to tend it, to care for the soul in ways that make us ready to receive the love that is promised. Angels bring to us the knowledge of how we must journey on the path to love and well-being, coming to us in both human form and as pure spirit that guide, instruct, and protect. Alice Miller chose to call the angelic force in an individual's life the enlightened witness. To her, this was in particular any individual who offered hope, love, and guidance to a wounded child in any dysfunctional setting. Most folks who come from a conflict-ridden family or a setting that was lacking in love remember the individuals who offered sympathy, understanding, and at times a way out. Speaking of her mother's miserable childhood, Hillary Clinton remembers that others outside the family circle stepped in, and their help made all the difference. From childhood on, I found many of my angels in favorite authors, writers who created books that enabled me to understand life with greater complexity. Yo, that shit hits. Like this last 2, 3 pages been hitting because I fucking love books. Anybody who knows me know I love books. But when she talks about coming from a toxic family, I ran away from home at 14, went to a group home, became a ward of the state. I got emancipated. But then I ran away from the group home too and was homeless for a while and shit. So anyways, during those hard times, even when I was still at home, but especially when I ran away, I found my liberation in books. I needed to analyze why things were the way they were, why my friends were suffering at home, and why when we went outside it was so hostile and violent, living in a system of white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy, and all the systems of oppression. I was like, yo, what the fuck is this? What kind of life is this? Yo, I found a lot of clarity and comfort in books. I think that's why I wanted to do this space, even though I'm sick as fuck. And not sure how I'll be tomorrow, but I just want to share with people something that's very important to me. And hopefully that is an act of service that counts as love. We'll see. These workers opened up my heart to compassion, forgiveness, and understanding. In her memoir, Are You Somebody? Irish journalist Nuala O'Faolain writes that the life-saving nature of books, declaring if there was nothing else, reading would obviously be worth living for. Okay, I feel it. German poet Rainer Maria Rilke's autobiographical writing transformed my sense of self as a teenager. At a time when I felt like an outsider, unworthy and unwanted, his work gave me a way to see being an outsider as a place of creativity and possibility. In the concluding chapter of the memoir of my girlhood, Bone Black, I write Wilt gives meaning to the wilderness of spirit I am living in. His book is a world I entered and find myself. He tells me that everything terrible is really something helpless that wants help from us. I read letters to a young poet over and over. I am drowning, and it is the raft that takes me safely to the shore. I received his book as a gift at a spiritual retreat. There, I met a priest who worked as a chaplain at a nearby college. He was one of the featured speakers. Intuiting the depths of my despair, he offered me solace. I was in my teens and had begun to feel as though I could not go on living. Suicidal longings dominated my waking thoughts and my nightmares. I believed death would release me from the overwhelming sadness that weighed me down. Listening to spiritual testimony at the retreat, I felt even more sorrowful. I could not understand how everyone else could be lifted by divine spirit when I felt more and more alone, as though I was falling into an abyss without hope or rescue. I never asked Father B what he saw when he looked at me or why I was chosen as one of the individuals he singled out for spiritual counseling. He touched my soul, offering to me and to everyone he connected with a loving spirit. In his presence, I felt chosen, beloved, like many earthly angels who visit us and touch our lives with their visionary power and healing wisdom. I never encountered him again, but I've never forgotten his presence. The gifts he offered to me, gifts of love and compassion freely given. The presence of angels, of angelic spirits, reminds us that there is a realm of mystery that cannot be explained by human intellect or will. We all experience this mystery in our daily lives in some ways, however small, whether we see ourselves as spiritual or not. We find ourselves in the right place at the right time, ready and able to receive blessings without knowing just how we got there. Sorry. Often we look at events retrospectively and can trace a pattern, one that allows us to intuitively recognize the presence of an unseen spirit guiding and directing our path. When I was a young girl, I would lie in my attic bed and talk endlessly with divine spirit about the nature of love. Then I did not imagine I would ever have the courage to speak about love without the solitary covering of secrecy or night. Like Jacob, wandering alone by the stream in the stillness of my pitch dark room, I grappled with the metaphysics of love, seeking to understand love's mystery. That grappling continued until my awareness intensified and a new vision of love came to me. Now I recognize that I was engaged from then until now in a disciplined spiritual practice, opening the heart. It led me to become a devout seeker on love's path, to talk with angels face to face, unafraid. Understanding all the ways fear stand in the way of our knowing love challenges us. Fearful that believing in the love's truths and letting them guide our lives will lead to further betrayal. We hold back from love when our hearts are full of longing. Being loving does not mean we will not be betrayed. Love helps us face betrayal without losing heart and renews our spirit so we can love again. No matter how hard or terrible our lot in life, to choose against lovelessness, to choose love, we can listen to the voices of hope that speaks to us, that speak to our hearts, the voices of angels. When angels speak of love, they tell us it is only by loving that we enter an earthly paradise. They tell us paradise is our home and love our true destiny. That's the end of the book, and I'm glad I could finish it. Um, I did promise someone that I would circle back because I started at chapter 5 on the rest of the recordings. So I'll probably finish 1 through 5. Oh, someone's requesting. Let's see if that worked. Hey, yours truly, it's been a minute. How you been?
Hey, Pen, glad to hear from you. I hope that you get better soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know there's like a flu bug going around, cause you ain't the only one.
Yeah, for real, it took out half my job.
Yeah, I could hear it in your voice, but just hang in there, cause
Thank you.
yeah, it's just that I guess that time of the year where like the seasons change and it's definitely getting colder. But yeah, like I just know like I noticed a lot of people have been getting sick too. So
True.
just hope for a
Thank you.
speedy recovery.
For real. I'm so restless, but thank you. I'm so used to like being, on the move and going, and I love to run my mouth, and I can't, and I could barely talk. I sound like a frog, but
Yeah, but hosting, I like that you hosted this space though on the book because I
cool.
definitely like the part where they were talking about the angels
Mm,
on I think it was like Jacob's ladder and angels.
hmm
I know you like touched on was reading that part.
Yeah.
That was a good part. I enjoyed that part.
Yo, me too, actually. I was surprised because I'm a hater and I was ready, but no, it made me think of just like, struggling and wrestling with things
Yeah,
and approaching love with more intent,
yeah,
but like not the intent to escape, but the intent to choose that, like no matter what comes, I can face it type of deal. So yeah, I feel you.
yeah. It's so crazy. Like it's so interesting. Like in Islam, like they talk about like the seen and the unseen world. So like when you talked about the angels, um, it's interesting because like when we pray, like we have to give thanks to the angels both on our right shoulder and our left shoulder.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It's because like when you finish praying, you have to give thanks to both the right angel and
Mm.
the angel on the right and the angel on the left, and then you give thanks to God.
Cool. I oftentimes see. Wait, I have a question. So in Islam, is the right and left the same way we see it, like urban pop culturally? That like one's the devil, one's the angel? Or that
Oh
might be
no,
an
no,
ignorant
no,
question.
no.
That's
See, like
different.
Hollywood. See, Hollywood. I understand like that interpretation, but like that's like a Hollywood's like misinterpretation or like a how Hollywood interpreted it. But
Mm,
the reality is that like you have an angel on your right and an angel on your left. So you're
gotcha.
giving thanks to both the angel on the right and the left because you have in like I guess like in the Christian sense like it's like your guardian angels, but everybody has angels on their right and their left.
Okay. No, I appreciate you teaching us that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Um, since I'm probably gonna stay up and never sleep again, I'm gonna. Oh, there's another request. Hold on. Real quick. Oh, yo, Valerie. Hey, Valerie. How you been? I can't hear Valerie if she's talking. There might be a delay.
Hello, how are
Oh,
you?
hi, Valerie.
I've been coming in this
Um,
space. I started coming in here because of Choose. I just love that young lady. She's so sweet and
right. Yeah.
contrary. But I wanted to know, do you have to be a Christian to be in this room? Because I am not. And
No,
I
I'm
have
not a
an
Christian.
angel on the left or the right.
No, no, I'm not a Christian. If you've heard me in space, you'd be like, "Oh, why is she reading this?" But it's Bell Hooks was very spiritual. I think she was a Buddhist, but she was raised in the church. So her contest on analyzing love and the culture is she admits is heavily influenced by her childhood in Christianity in Christian churches.
Yeah. Well,
That's why.
we've all had that. I'm 68 years old. I have children who are on this app. You probably know them. I'm not going to say who they are. Maze knows who they are. But um, I've been coming here and I love these readings. Can you please add me to your list of people who that you contact when you're going to open a space?
I have a confession. Okay. I'm terrible at these spaces because I never send invites. I just start the space and start reading. It's usually Choose who does that. But yeah, you know what? I'm gonna take responsibility and start doing that. So absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Oh,
I will.
well, thank you so much. You're such a nice young lady. The whole group is. I like you have a
Mhm.
really nice, calm group most of the,
Mm.
most of the time. But thank you for letting
Yeah.
me speak.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, what I'm probably gonna do, because I'm gonna stay up. I don't sleep much. So I promised another listener in another space that I would finish the entire Bell Hooks book. So what I'll do is I'm probably going to close this space, post it in the thread of Bell Hook spaces, and then I'm going to open a space and I'm going to read 1 through 5, and that'll be the entire thread in audio form. So that's probably what I'll do next here in a few minutes. I'm going to just grab some medicine real quick and just take like a 10-minute break, and then I'll open up the space and do exactly what you said. Send you an invite, Miss Valerie. So thank y'all for coming again. I apologize. I sound like a fraud. But yeah, I just really love books and I just wanted to do some service since I can't really leave the house. So hopefully this counts. So yeah, I'll open the space here in another 5 minutes. And y'all take care.